They were welcomed to the war with a rocket attack. And they'd been warned of what it would be like, the maddening hum of Germany's V-2 buzz bomb rockets, as they were called, and they recognized the noise as soon as they heard it. And so they knew what to do in the first moments of their tour of duty, that it would entail them taking cover under anything they could find, desks and chairs and the like. But after that first day, when the explosion hit, thankfully far enough away to where no one was hurt, never really in any real danger, the women of the 688, the nation's first all-black female battalion, didn't see anything resembling combat again. Now, as I talk about them today, I have to tell you at 9:30, Sally Luna told me that there's a great movie about the 688 on Netflix. I see some nods. Some of you have seen it. If you haven't, you can go home and if it sounds interesting, you can watch it. It sounds like a pretty good movie. I'm going to watch it myself. But the 688, what their job entailed, far from fighting battles, was to go into a weathered ancient warehouse in southwest England and drag open the groaning doors. And that's when they walked in for the first time and realized exactly the war that they were in for. Because in the gloom and the numbing cold, the air dark and damp, and they walked in and were confronted by a gigantic mountain of mail. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of letters and packages from ceiling to floor in this gigantic warehouse. And it was February 1945, 8 months after D-Day and Normandy, and the Allies were in the final brutal push out of France and into Germany. The women of the 688 were told that morale was low in the foxholes and in the snow in the months after the Battle of the Bulge. And they didn't need to know that, or they didn't need to be told that, because they knew it already, that in that battle, many young men had frozen in the snow for 5 weeks during the fight. 4 exhausting years into the war, and so many of the soldiers had heard no word from home in months. No letters from grandmas or kid brothers or girlfriends to let them know that they were still people caring for them, that there was a world that they still recognized waiting for them to come home with real food and hugs at the door, with baseball games or a subway, a world worth fighting for and worth fighting to go back to. And those people weren't getting the mail. The men were all packing parachutes and loading howitzers, and the whole military postal system had more or less collapsed since D-Day had happened. And then a rush of Christmas letters and packages had overwhelmed the system, swamped the system, and they were that much more behind. Everything just collapsed and was stuck. Some letters had been sitting in those warehouses for 2 years. And the women of the 688 were given 6 months to get everything moving. And indeed, some of the packages actually were already moving. The care packages stuffed with Christmas fruitcakes and Aunt Fanny's famous lemon drop cookies baked with care were all becoming a treat for the rats that the women could observe as they crawled under letters, and there would be movement, and you just knew what it was. The women of the 688 fought some real battles with those. And the warehouses were freezing, and the letters were faded. Some were completely preposterously addressed. One was written to my big brother Eddie, a soldier in Italy. And the women would try to piece together, with their fingers numb from the cold in the old warehouse, where to find this or that soldier, no matter how hard. There were 750 of them that took on the task. The army was stretched so thin that they were in this battle pretty much all on their own. Along the way, the women faced hostility because of their color, because they were second-class citizens, from sexual harassment or misogyny at every turn. And when 3 of the women died in a Jeep accident, the army would not pay for their burial. So the unit pooled their money and paid for it themselves. But this didn't deter them, this first unit of black women in the United States Army. But this didn't deter them. They divided into 3 shifts, allowing them to work round the clock, and pretty soon 65,000 pieces of mail were going out of the warehouse every day, most of them to their rightful owners. They had to hold the whole map of the war in their heads, knowing unit positions almost as well as the generals most of the time, so that if they ran across some letter that was 6 months old that had been meant for a unit that was in Libya or in southern France, but now was in a different place in northern France or in Italy or Germany itself, they could redirect the mail where it was supposed to go. And as a result, as a result of their work, some private first class who had parachuted in behind enemy lines and then connected with some unit that wasn't his own but was going the same way could still get his mail. Hearing about his sister's illness from a concerned father, or hearing from that girl that he had taken to a carnival the night before he'd shipped out. Letters still saying that she was still there lifting spirits. The 6888 were given 6 months to clear the years-long backlog of mail. It took them 3 months. They sorted mail, they tracked down and arrested package thieves, they brought messages from home. And a year later, with the war over, the battalion was disbanded. There was no special ceremony. They received no commendations. No effort was made by a grateful nation. And the women found their way through their lives in whatever way they chose to go. But when history is left just sitting in a warehouse, waiting for people are bound to find it. And in the last decade, people have done just that, starting with a veteran pilot who started a website to remember the 6888 and their dedicated service. Later, some legislators caught on, and in 2018, they dedicated and paid for a monument in Leavenworth, Kansas, where the unit was headquartered. A handful of the surviving women were present for it. They've been honored by the United States Senate and the United States House of Representatives. Sometimes it takes a very long time for people to get the message. Today we hear about women who carry faithfully messages of hope. And so I want to turn to these other two women. These women in the story that Luke tells, two other women of color who have a message for the world in the text that we read today. And like the women of the 6888, they aren't being noticed by the world, even though their message of good news was needed very badly. Indeed, their message is for the whole world. And these two women are carrying babies under some pretty unusual circumstances. Mary, of course, is pregnant way before she is supposed to be, before she's been married. And what can you do in that kind of circumstance, especially when you live in a world where men call all the shots and are rarely kind? And when you live in a small village where, let's just face it, everybody is in everybody else's business all the time. You go see a cousin. You head down south to a cousin who lives several villages away. And so Mary goes and visits her cousin Elizabeth, who is getting up there in years. She's probably 60 or 70 when this story is told. And when Mary gets to Elizabeth's house, there is more big news because Elizabeth herself is also pregnant. Now, I don't know very much just yet about aging. And also, believe it or not, I don't know very much about being pregnant either. So I assume that this must have been a wonderful blessing. To be 70 years old and about to have a baby, what joyful news. Having your first baby right at retirement when you have all that extra time on your hands and energy that's freed up for those early morning feedings and chasing around a toddler. I mean, doesn't that just sound wonderful? Please do hear my sarcasm in this because it actually sounds, of course, impossibly hard. So these women need each other in their own ways, and so Mary goes and visits Elizabeth because, as Robert Frost says of family are those people where when you have to go there, they have to take you in. So Mary goes to see Elizabeth, and they help each other. Much like the women of the 6888, they lean on one another with a mission of delivering a message for the world. You know, we're talking about holy tension during this Advent season, that sometimes God takes things that seem to be in tension with one another, and actually it's in those circumstances that God's work really seems to unfold. And as I read this text, far from just the circumstances of the story itself, one of the things I love about the text here is, yes, we're reading theology and reading truths about who God is and how God works and what God does, but it's not told in the abstract. It's told in the context of a family story. We're reading a family story as we read the text today, of people who had real challenges and lived in an imperfect world, far from the one that they wish that they lived in, and yet they persevere. And that tells us a truth that is true for us as well, where when we open the Bible, yes, what we read inside of it is universal, and it is also told through family stories of people who didn't know what to do, but they know who they are, and they trust who God is, and God's promises are birthed through that, along with these women's babies. A few years ago, I saw this painting. Gil, we can go ahead and bring it up on the television screens. I saw it actually in Santa Fe through a traveling exhibit. This painting is called La Perla, or the Pearl, and it is painted by the Italian master Raphael. And there's this exhibit that exists through the Prado Museum in Spain, where they take high-quality prints of some of their great works, and they'll send them all over the world. And in 2021, it came to Santa Fe. You could walk through the plaza in Santa Fe, which was great, especially this was pandemic time. It was good to have something to do outdoors, to look at all these great works of art. And this one I really quickly honed in on as I was looking that day, because it shows this exact same family from the text that we read. I have to imagine it's about 18 months, maybe 2 years into the future. And this isn't really in the text itself, but what they're doing is what I imagine they would have done, where these two women not only are pregnant together, but they still stay in touch, and they come and visit one another, and they raise their children almost, they're cousins, but almost as if they're surrogate brothers for one another. And so Mary and Elizabeth, they have their baby boys and their toddlers, and I mean, I don't know, they look kind of like ornery toddlers to me in the picture. And quick side note, art experts and experts in preservation actually x-rayed this picture, and this is actually a second draft. There was a first draft that was painted underneath it, and the original draft in it, Raphael painted a painting that was frankly just, it wasn't quite as good. It was a lot more pastoral. The first draft is a lot more idyllic, where the children are calmer and it's in a pastoral setting. And it's as if someone saw the original version and they sat Raphael down and said, motherhood is not all children laughing and bringing you posies in a field. Sometimes, a lot of times, it's hard. So we have these two toddlers instead. John is the one that's on the left there, and there's a camel skin on him, a little bit of foreshadowing there. He's wearing a camel skin. And Jesus is the one on the right. Frankly, I think he has a little bit of a look in his eye, like he's thinking of putting ants down someone's pants. And Mary is, you can see, she's holding him back. I mean, how would you want that job? To have to discipline the Son of God and hope that he doesn't zap you or something. I don't know. But please also notice Elizabeth, woman on the right, because boy, does she look tired. She looks like this toddler John is just wearing her out. Who can blame her? And the really crazy part or the really great part is, in this crazy family story with these two little handfuls, God's story is being birthed in it too. So going back to that first visit in the text, when the two women meet one another, these two messengers sent by God that they carry in their wombs meet one another too. And this sounds scary to me. The text says that John leaps for joy in the womb. I've known pregnant women who've described when babies move like this, and every time I hear about it and every time I read this text, I just say a prayer that I'm not a woman, because I know, thankful prayer, because I know I wouldn't be tough enough to handle something like that happening to me in my own body. That sounds like something that would happen in one of the Alien movies, not in a text from the Bible. And after Elizabeth says all these amazing blessings and prophesies over Mary, Mary sings this song, and it's kind of coy in the way that it interweaves in religious language some really kind of revolutionary language. So it starts out, "My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for he has looked with favor on the lowliness of his servant. Surely from now on all generations will call me blessed. And holy is for the mighty one has done great things for me, and holy is his name." Sounds like church speak to me. His mercy is for those who fear him from generation to generation. And the tone starts to change. He has shown strength with his arm. He has scattered the proud in the thoughts of their hearts. He's brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things, and the rich he has sent away empty. She's singing theology here. She's singing about this tension between the world that we know, where very often the rich are not sent away empty and the hungry are rarely filled. And whenever I read it, I think it's strange, because the verbs that Mary sings are all in the past tense. That God has done these things already. And I can't help but wonder, what is the deal with that? And fortunately for you, I'm a Greek nerd, and I can go back and look at the words, and the Greek nerd in me will tell you in my nerdy way that the verb tense is one that is used to express something that is timelessly true. It's not just past tense. There's no equivalent to the verb tense in English, but it would be like something has happened in the past and it continues forward. So we read it as past tense, but what it really means is past, present, future, no differentiation. That this is always what God is working to usher in, even if it isn't complete quite yet. And so the good news, at least in part, is that the world that we dream of, especially in our struggles, is also the world that God dreams of. And it's coming. And God lifts up the poor and the marginalized and the oppressed and the desperate. And in fact, they know God's goodness before the rest of us do usually. And so let us pray. Gracious God, 2 women we remember carried 2 babies. And with them came a message. And they were the first 2 to know it. And we claim that promise today. And we take it seriously. All of Mary's song, all of Elizabeth's prophecy. And we walk with the same promises and the same hope. Amen.